sure I can see this. Okay, there we go. All good? Yeah, seems like we're good. All good? Yeah, seems like we're good. All good? Yeah, got a little echo there. Alright. Go ahead and post this. So, yeah, today, VR nunchucks in dreams. And, of course, we're going to use this first-person VR puppet. I made a slightly modified version of it. But I've turned on my motion controllers. You know, start button here on the right of the controller, right side of the controller, to get to this menu. If you go to Dream Shaping and click search with X, the bottom left button here, and you click here and you search for VR and then space with triangle, or right here, puppet. I'm clicking all these letters with X, and I'm just moving around my motion controller, primary one. And it's this one. So I took this and modified it a little bit, but it's pretty much wired up exactly the same way. But I'll click start creating here with my beam and create a new element or scene, and it gives me this floor, of course, which I'll delete right away. And we're just gonna make the nunchucks in this file. So I'll turn on the grid snap first, and we can model this easily. We can sculpt it. We'll go into sculpt mode. So starting from here, I deleted that block with the triangle on my primary by pointing the beam at it, just pressing the top right button from the move controller, it's triangle. And then, yeah, just pull the secondary trigger, and this menu comes up, the assembly menu, and you'll use your beam to point and use the bottom left X button there for clicking onto modes. This button right here with the wedge and the speaker and the paint stroke, and then it'll be this yellow button here, Sculpt Mode, with the shapes on it. We'll open that and place a cylinder, just one, because we're doing one sculpt here. I'll pick like a gray, and then if you when you're pulling this secondary trigger, there's this sphere here, and if you point the beam at it and click it with the bottom left X button on your motion controller, on your primary motion controller, you'll get these finishes, quick finishes, and I'll select metal there with X, and that gives you this. You could do this shiny metal too if you want, but I like metal. And then you could kind of blend finishes, but I'll switch the shape, point the beam here, click it with the bottom left X button on your primary controller, click the second shape here, cylinder, and then I edit the shape a little bit. You can see it there. So to do that, it's the secondary motion controller trigger, and then this button here with the paintbrush and the gear, point the beam at it, and then with the primary controller, bottom left button, X, to open this, edit shape, and I kind of just pull it out to get a nunchuck. Get one of the handles for a nunchuck. And then you just take your beam and point it at the door here to leave the shape editor. I think you could hit circle too. You can also hit circle on your primary controller, or you could hit that X there. And then before you exit sculpt mode, you want to place it down. And if it allows you to place it like in the middle of the grid right off the bat, then you're lucky and that's good. You can do that. But if not, you can go back into this edit shape mode, and when you're in edit shape mode, use this menu here. Point your beam at the grip, this thing here with the dotted line, the dotted square around the sphere, and then click it with X, the bottom left button on your primary controller, and then you'll see where the green point is, and then point the beam at the point in the middle, and then change it by clicking X there. And then you click X on the leave shape editor here, get out of there, and that'll make sure you're able to place it right in the middle. So you could put it right there if you want it centered like that, or if you want like the whole thing centered, you can just remember how many ticks you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe. Yeah, see, because these are pretty big. So if I press both move buttons and push in, I can zoom out to get a better sense of scale of what I'm doing. So I'll use my secondary trigger and pull it open to get the guides, hit it with X, and make my grid coarser by clicking the plus sign with X. And then recenter my imps here, recenter myself, my body. That's important too. Move your body back into a straightforward position at the PlayStation camera thing. And then this. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I could do 3 or 2 because it'll be mirrored, right? So I'll do 2. Yeah, I'll do 3. So 3 ticks there. I stamped it. Now I'm still in sculpt mode, so I need to leave sculpt mode. I don't have to pull up the menu, but I just point the beam at the door with the arrow, and then the bottom left X button on the primary controller to get out of there. And we've got one sculpt of a cylinder. And we can go back and make it fancy, you know, we can add rings, you know, like this later and do a bunch of different stuff. But for now, we're all the way on the outside, and we have this one handle of a nunchuck that we're going to copy. So we'll take our secondary controller, and the top right button here, this triangle, we hold it, and then we use our trigger for our primary controller. Our primary controller's trigger while we're holding triangle on our secondary to grab it and copy it. And then once it's copied, in order to make sure it's aligned properly, instead of like trying to grab it and press triangle to align it, I grab it with the trigger here and then press square, the top left button on the secondary controller, because we can, since it's a different sculpt. Then when these arrows come up, just push the secondary controller to the left, and there, that flipped it so that this edge is on a tick like this edge was on the tick. So now we can pull it 1, 2, 3 away from the center, and those look about right. That looks how you would want your nunchucks. And now, since they're two separate sculpts, we have to connect them. Now, it's not as simple as like modeling a physical chain and modeling the links and like having them hold together, because in this game, objects, even when they're collidable and stuff, they will fall through each other. It's pretty glitchy. It's not always perfect, but we have connectors to do the job for us. So we use our secondary controller's trigger, pull up the assembly menu, and we have our guides, we have our grid on. So this gadgets button right next to it with the wires and the boxes, we click that by pointing the beam, clicking the bottom left button, X, and then it's this pink group here. So you've got all these colors, this like molecule, H2O looking molecule type thing, or it's a ball joint, but you click it by pointing the beam, clicking with bottom left button X, open it up, and you get a bunch of different options. You want the string here, so there's a couple that look similar. There's this elastic. You don't want that. Well, the elastic would work, but the string is better because it doesn't like stretch. You don't want your nunchucks really stretching all that much. But you can edit the parameters of the elastic and make it stretch only somewhat. So if that's the kind of thing you're after, you can use it. But we're going to use the string here. Point the beam there. Bottom left X button to select it. And then now, when you point at one of these, you'll have to select which one is going to be the dominant one. So if I select this one on the left here, I'll pull the trigger, and you see the yellow ball has snapped to this edge, and we're now pulling this blue end around. And so we point this blue end to the other nunchuck to connect it to there. When we see the nunchuck is highlighted, the other handle is highlighted, then we pull the trigger, and now we've got nunchucks that are connected. So these pretty much look like they're already oriented, but you can pull the trigger on each joint and press triangle. But you'll see there's like these, if you select it with the X button, these little handles here that control how far, just controls how far the string goes. But whenever you set time into motion, if you just take your secondary controller and pull the trigger, and then point your beam at this play button to start time, hit it with X, the bottom left button on your primary controller, then you'll see your nunchuck falls. And I think this would be happening a lot faster if I weren't broadcasting live. But there's the dominant nunchuck, and it's not swaying. I think as soon as you connect the blue part of this string to an object, it will tell it to be movable in its tweak menu. I'm not sure if that's the case, but for whatever reason, this is movable. And this one is not, because if it were, it would be falling into the abyss. So we'll leave that as non-movable for now so we can work with everything and test it out. And we'll add some visual to the nunchucks before we export it, before we save it. So we'll go to the paint mode. So secondary controller, pull the trigger, and then on your primary controller, bottom left X button to select modes here. Open up that modes button again. Speaker wedge paint stroke. And then click the orange mode with the paint stroke with the X button, aiming the beam at it. And then you will get this big menu with all these flecks. So you can select a fleck. And for nunchucks, I think this circle makes the most sense. So I pick like a gray color again, like maybe a bit lighter of a gray. And there's my circular gray fleck. As you can see, we can have it straight up and down vertical, right? But we'll bring it over to our dominant nunchuck and stamp it right there. Now, well, hold on. I'll bring my primary controller down to the left-hand side and press square, the top left button on the primary controller, to undo that. And instead, I'm going to make sure I'll pull the trigger on my secondary controller here and go into Tools. See this wrench and the paint stroke here? And then I'll point the beam at that and click it with the bottom left X button on the primary controller. And then once I'm here, I want Rule Flicks. It's all the way, well, it's the ruler button. It has a ruler on it. And when you click that, it's by pointing the beam at it in bottom left corner X on the primary controller, it allows you to make straight lines. So we will, we got the grid on, so we can go right here, and I think we can pull the trigger and then, stretch it to the length needed. Now, since we have it snapped to grid, I'm going to let it go like that. But just to let you know, I'll demonstrate how it doesn't have to be perfect. Say I went that way. It does have to be lined up, with the nunchuck, but it's going to be there. So actually, here, I'll do it like this. I'll hide this one. Tools, hide. Boop. Okay, cool. So say we're, I've got that hidden now. So say we're in modes, we're in paint mode, and we've got our circle flex selected, we've got our color selected, and we pulled the trigger on the primary controller. It wouldn't matter because you can take your secondary controller and take the top right button, the triangle, and hold it. And then on your primary controller, where you point the beam at this fleck, and you take the top left button, the square here, and you press that, and it opens this tweak menu for the painting. And then, once you're in this tweak menu, you can go to stroke properties here, and there is an endpoint slider. So see, as you drag this down, you can adjust this to a custom length that you need. So if I dragged it a little bit over, at 32%, that would work for me. If I unhid everything, you'll see, I'll zoom in on it. That's exactly where it needed to be. Because of course I did see the connector there. And if you can't see the connector, use your secondary controller, pull the trigger, then point the beam at the eye, bottom left X button on your primary controller. And then once all these buttons come up, you're clicking on this X-ray and connectors. Make sure this is turned on so that you can always see those connectors. So now we've got one, I guess I will keep this just to demonstrate that you can do the whole thing like this. Your stroke does not have to be perfect. So you see what I just did there? Now we're giving the chain like a fake 3D perspective. We're still snapped to grid so we can get perfect 90-degree angle. And we just take our beam and point it at our flex here, the circle flex that make the chain. And then once we see it's highlighted, we take our secondary controller, press the top right button, the triangle, hold it in, and then our primary controller, we're pulling the trigger to clone it, but instead of dragging it over and creating any lines, any green lines, we're just going to twist our controller. And you can let go of triangle over here now, by the way. We'll twist our controller, make sure that we're not flying off on an angle over here, and until we get 90 degrees, and then let go. So now we've got the visual for our nunchucks, but when we pull the trigger for our secondary controller and play time, you can see it's not animated at all. So I'm going to take my primary controller, drag it down to the bottom left hand side, and press the top left button square to undo that, and make sure we set this stroke up first, and then I'll just rotate it again. But we take our secondary controller, top right button triangle, hold it in, and take the primary controller, top left button square, press it when the physical chain fleck is highlighted, our rule fleck circles, to pull up our tweak menu. And now in the tweak menu this time, we're going to, I'll spin this around real quick so that we're oriented the way we were before, with the yellow on the left, blue on the right. And in our painting, we want to go to this Newton's cradle here. Point our beam at that, and on our primary controller, bottom left X button, select it, and then there's this fleck, there's a stroke with a hand for making the stroke physical. So now, as soon as we click that and play it, we still got nothing. So rewind time. There's this attached at both ends. So turn that on, see what that does. Play, still nothing. But then there's this, so you turn the first two buttons on. That's what we've done so far. First button, second button, to make it physical and attach at both ends. And then we're going to attach the end to an object. So this button, once we point the beam and do the bottom left X button to select that, it'll start flashing, and now we have an opportunity to select an object. But we're not going to select this one where our yellow part is connected, because that, we're going to group this painting, we're going to group the rule flex straight to that one. This is the one we're going to select when this is flashing. And once we point it here and select it with X or pull the trigger, there's a white cloud that appears that says, yes, you've attached this to that object. So now when we play it, you'll see it's attached. Something's not quite right though. So we'll see if we can grab this by taking the primary controller, pulling the trigger, taking secondary controller, and see how it says to press triangle. We hold triangle and then press X. So now this painting is grouped to that, and we can scope out. I don't know. You might not be able to do it that way. But let's see if we win. Yeah, that's weird. I swear I did it that way the other day, though. Cause yeah, I think I connected it up right, but we'll see. Bloop, bloop. Yeah, I was almost certain the other day. I basically just But in any case, that's why the grid is so magical though, because it lets you go exactly to where you need to go. So let's see. If I group it, do the yellow handle, yellow connector handle, and then take it. Now if you get that box, you need to scope in. So you hold the secondary controller, top right button, the triangle, hold it, and then on your primary controller, your bottom left X, you click the object you want to scope into, you point the beam over it, and you keep clicking until everything else is gray. So in this case, yeah, we've got it able to select there. That's gray. And then once you highlight that with your beam, just hold the secondary controller top right triangle button, and then on your primary controller, the top left square, press it to open that menu. Go back to the Newton's cradle with the beam and X bottom left button. Then those first two, and then when you take that third one, we can't select what we need to now because we have to scope out first. So keep that in mind. Point the beam there, bottom left X button, pull the trigger there, and play. Yeah, so that's what we want. So my bad, you do have to make the rule fleck the right length. So use the grid for that. Don't make it too long. Like you can't make it way long and then connect it and expect it to work like I did earlier, but you can make it like a little bit longer or whatever if you're not using the grid, and it won't affect it too much obviously, but use the grid because you know, that's such a better result than what we had earlier. Don't you agree? I agree. So we'll pause time, we'll rewind it. And so for this part, I'm going to take my secondary controller, top right button, triangle, hold it, and then primary controller, bottom left button, X to press it. And so once I'm in here where I've got both my handle and my chain, I'm already in here, so I will twist this and see what, whoops. Secondary controller, hold the triangle, top right button, and then use the trigger to pull it while the grid is there, highlighting this chain, twist it 90 degrees. And now, yeah, so now it only twists the one side at first. So you have to go over to this other side and twist it as well. And it's kind of tricky to select, but you can see that one's highlighted and then there's that one. Oops. Now, I think, yeah, if I close that menu, it gives me less grief. And now I can kind of see where I am better. If I play this, everything works right. But yeah, so I'll have to figure out the secret here. I think we're already scoped in as much as we could be, so. And I'm seeing you can't just take it right there. You can't just take it where. But, as you can see, it's all wired up right. It's already connected to that. If you open both tweak menus, they're both connected already to the same handle, which is good. It's exactly what we want. We're just trying to rotate this. So maybe if I scope in, Yeah, if I scope in, everything is looking right here. So I'll go ahead and unattach it. Point the beam there and press triangle, the top right button. And that will free it temporarily. And then we'll try again. We'll scope out with the X pointing on that red button. Attach to object again. There we go. So that helped us. And since we copied that and rotated it while we were already scoped in, we didn't have to worry about grabbing it and then moving over the handle and then using this to press triangle and pulling the trigger to scope in, or pressing X rather. So now we've got nunchucks with a physical chain and a logical chain, or a mechanical chain I should say. We got the mechanism of the nunchucks and the visuals. And I think we can actually put some shine on these flicks. So take the secondary controller, top right button, triangle, hold it in. And while you're holding in, don't hit the move button on this controller because you'll go flying. But while you're holding it in, point the beam at that chain and then press the bottom left X button here on your primary controller so that you get into these scope into this level. And then once you've got the chain, scope in one more time. Wait, no, don't scope in. Press square and open the tweak menus of both of those rule flex again. And then you can put the menus side by side. And you can wire things up so that it matches if you want, but I'm just gonna go to coat properties, yeah. So on the first page here, I think it's, yeah, right here on finish, you just turn up the finish. I'm gonna put it to 100%. So it's the sparkle and the fleck stroke because I want to make it shiny. And then I want to also make it metal. So that's obviously way too shininess, way too shiny, way too metal. But yeah, so if you wire this up, just wire the shininess and the metal together. And the finish, since it's both 100, I don't care. But this way you only have to set it once. So now, take your beam and point it at your shininess, roughness, secondary controller, the top right triangle button, you hold it. And then the top left button, the square, you press on this parameter here to open the shininess. And I could set it to 25 to start out to look. And so that does them both at once. You can see that's pretty shiny, that's good. Take my metalness down. Take this top right triangle button, hold it. Top left square button, point the beam on the primary controller. Press it. And instead of 100, we'll go down to like 70. There, that looks about right. And then turn the tint up, original color saturation down, tint up, original color saturation down on that one too. So there's tint, original color saturation. And I'll connect the colors, so I only have to set the color once. And that's like a pretty decent color, really. I'll just make it like a little bit slightly more gray. You could put anything you want to that. So now I can close those menus and scope out. Those will disappear. And then if you go into play mode, you can kind of observe what it looks like. So I'm happy with that for now. Like I said, we can go back and make it fancier looking later. And for now though, one thing I will do before we leave here is change the I'll open this. So I scoped in here. I took my primary controller and held in the top right triangle button. Then I took my X, my bottom left button on my primary controller. Press, oh, did I say primary before? I meant held triangle, top right button on my secondary controller. Bottom left X button on my primary controller. Click it while holding this triangle button. And then we can go up from the X to the top left square on my primary controller while still holding triangle, and click it to open the tweak menu, properties menu for this handle. And in there, I will turn down my original color saturation, and I'll turn up my tint so that, yeah, now we can see that's different. So our primary handle, the one we'll be grabbing it from, will be a different color. That's like a dark gray. I'll make this like all the way black. And then, yeah. So that's good. I'll go ahead and quick save this. Just look at it with the VR. Quick save element. And this is a contraption element because Logic Machines gameplay. It's a machine because it has a string. It's VR compatible, but apparently selecting that limits the amount of tags you can put in if somebody uses it. So I'm just gonna leave it as not sure. But it is VR compatible, of course. Any controller, motion controller is VR controller. Yeah, because it's just the nunchucks. Except with X, bottom left button. And then I'm gonna call this nunchucks. Well, that's there. But actually, before I do all this, one more thing I'm gonna do. Gotcha. One more thing. I'm gonna scope in, top right triangle, hold it in, bottom left X button, point at the handle, and then click that, and then open that tweak menu again with the top left square button on your primary controller. And in here, we'll go to the Newton's Cradle, bottom left X button, click it, and we're gonna see this imp interaction down here, Newton's Cradle page. It has this hand grab. You want to point your beam there and the bottom left X button on your primary controller. Click that to change it to grab so that your imp can grab this dominant nunchuck. And the other one's just going to swing around, so we don't make it grabbable. If we made it grabbable, the VR puppet can grab it, but the hand like droops and it's a terrible mess. So we'll only make this one grabbable. Now we'll save it. Quick save, element, contraption. And to delete all that text real quick, I went to my primary controller, top left button, square, and I held it. I just held it. And then shift, nunchucks. Nunchucks. Boom. Done. So now we have those nunchucks ready to go. And yeah, I'll exit this creation. Well, actually, yeah. I'll remix them. Now I'm remixing the nunchucks. I'll pull the trigger of my secondary controller, motion controller, point the beam at the search button, the magnifying glass, and do the bottom left X button on my primary controller to search. And then I'll point my beam at this search bar here, yellow search bar at the top. Bottom left X button on the primary controller. Search for again, and then it's the VR puppet. First person VR puppet there. So it's that first one. I'm gonna use my version. Turn the grid snap on. And I'll snap him. Right there. And now I'll use my beam, making sure I'm scoped out of everything by, holding the triangle on the secondary controller, and then hitting circle the bottom right on the primary controller a couple times to get out of everything. In case you're scoped in, that'll get you out. And when you're out, you can point the beam at the nunchuck chain, and you can see that everything is highlighted. Pull the trigger on your primary controller, and then with your secondary controller, the bottom right circle, click that in, and then twist down, or twist to the right to size it down, let go, and so it's kind of like a ratchet or a wrench. You let go when you're going back, and you hold it in while you're twisting. So it's like you start with it big, and then you twist all the way to the left, press in the circle, twist to the right, let go, twist all the way to the left, press in circle, twist to the right. And then now you can look and see my hand's about that big. I want the nunchucks about that big. So that's fine. And they're right up where the hand is, and I'll pull them over like that. And if I play, those nunchucks just kind of float in the air, but they are grabbable. So if you're in play mode, it's awkward. You grab it and it won't move. It won't let you move it anywhere. So they have to be movable. So we need like a little table to grab this off of, and so we can move it around. So I'll go back in the edit mode, the start button on the right side of the primary controller, or the left side. They both do start. I mean secondary controller, both of them. And then I want this. Yeah, okay, that's in the middle. So this guy, I'm going to pull the trigger on him, and then press triangle with my primary controller, top right triangle. So align him back to grid. See if yeah, we're good. He doesn't move. Alright, and then I'll make a table real quick here. Take secondary controller, top right button, hold the triangle, bottom right on the primary controller, circle, press it so that you know you're scoped out. Keep pressing it until you don't hear pshing, and then you know you're scoped all the way out. Then you can go secondary controller, pull the trigger, and then modes here. Bottom right X on your primary controller, click it, and go into Sculpt Mode, the yellow button with the shapes, and sculpt yourself a cubic table. I'm just going to make it red. I'm selecting all this stuff with X and the beam. Recenter my imps real quick. And so I'll place my table. I wanted it to be, yeah, like that. So I'll worry about placing the nunchucks in a bit, but if you want to hollow out your table real quick, make it look a little neat, you can take the beam and then bottom left X to select your rectangle, and then this button with the plus, click it once and it'll change to a minus and all this stuff will become inverted. And now you can take your bottom right on your secondary circle, hold it, and twist down until your square's like that. And you can basically like pull it one away and push it one in like that and stamp it. And then once you've got that, take your secondary controller, pull the trigger, and then this tools with the wrench, the cube, take your primary controller, bottom left X, click it, and then this stretch with the two arrows, click that with the bottom left X, the primary controller. And now you're just going to push this all the way through so that it sticks out by one on the other side too. And then go from under. You're taking, by the way, when I pan around, I'm always using my move buttons in the middle of the X, square, circle, triangle. And controller, trigger on the primary controller to grab that face. Whenever you see an arrow, it shows you the arrow from which face you're going to stretch. So if you grab that, it lets you pull that in. So we want the arrow pointing down, so we're grabbing that face. We push it up into the table. Then we let go. So now we've got that. We pull the trigger of our secondary controller again. And then point our beam at the move this time. And the bottom left X button on our primary controller. So now, take our secondary controller and hold in the top right triangle. And this time with our grid turned on still, we're going to use our primary controller to grab that when you see that subtractive box being highlighted from underneath. You'll grab it by holding in the secondary controller's triangle on the top right, pull the trigger, and then twist the primary controller. And then if there's a line there, if there's a green line, just pull it back so that there's not. And as long as you do that from the middle and you have this all aligned with an axis, it'll work beautifully and you'll get this table ready to go. You can take your secondary controller, pull the trigger, and you don't even have to. Just point your beam at this door with the red arrow, everything, red door and arrow to get out of there. Take your nunchucks, pull them up. You could use your secondary controller trigger to pull up the assembly menu, and then point your beam at guides here with the primary controller, and at the bottom left X to open it, and then turn off your grid. You point at the grid here next to the minus and plus on the left side, or depending on which way you have it mirrored. It's this grid that opens it, and then the dots will disappear. But actually, I don't want to close it completely. I just want to press the minus sign to get finer movement. Once I've got that, whoops, I'll move the chain up. There we go. And now there's a neat little trick that we might be able to use. So we take our secondary controller, pull the trigger, and then on the play button, point our beam at it in the primary controller, bottom left X button, click. It'll it'll fall down to the table, and then we just grab it, and that it'll remember the location. But first, we have to take our dominant nunchuck. So we'll take our secondary controller, the top right triangle button, hold it, and then the bottom left X button on our primary controller, we'll click until we can highlight this, and then we'll take the top right top left square button on our primary controller, point it there at the nunchuck handle, the primary nunchuck handle, one we're going to be grabbing, that hopefully you change to a different color. And then when its menu comes up, go to the Newton's cradle and bottom left X button on the primary controller to select that menu. It's grabbable, but we want it to be movable. So you can also change that in the original file too before you import it here. Make it movable. But then it'll fall to its death every time you go to view it. So that's why I don't do that. So now we can close this, point this here on the X top right, and then bottom left X button on the primary controller to click it. Scope out by clicking that with the same X button, bottom left. And then take our primary controller and do the bottom left X menu to start time. Nunchucks will fall. Well, now we must be grouped out of there. So that's no good. Gotta make sure that this is all connected. Wonder what happened there. Let's see about the connectors. Yeah, that's strange. So, as you can see, for some reason that connector is not wired up anymore properly. So we're just going to rewire it up. So, all I did was I took my primary controller and pointed the beam at the yellow or the blue one. And once you see that the connector is highlighted, you just take your primary controller, the triangle there on the top right button, and delete. If you hover, it'll tell you. See in that little menu that comes up. Just use top right triangle button on my primary controller to delete it. And then we just hook it up again. So, this gadgets menu, bottom left X button to select it, bottom left X button to select string again right here. Yeah. Before we do that, we're going to have to scope in. Maybe? Nah, we can't. Yeah. It looks weird because this is all one now. But it'll be okay. That is bizarre, isn't it? Because it seems like it should be working. Seems like it should be working fine. You know what happened? Things got all funky when I scaled them down. So, what we're gonna do, you can't, oh yeah, you can put it inside itself. Okay. So yeah, we're just gonna place them in here. We're gonna scale everything else up. And that'll be okay. So, in order to select multiple things in the scene, just scope out of everything like we did with the secondary controller, holding, you know, top right button, triangle, bottom right on the primary controller, circle, just hit it a bunch of times until you no longer hear a noise. And once you're scoped out of everything, just take your primary controller, aim your beam at the first object you want to select, and then the bottom left X button, hold it. When you click it, it'll select the first thing. Then drag your beam over your table and anything else you want to make big. Then you've got it all selected. There'll be a dotted line. And you grab with your primary controller, pull the trigger to grab, and then take the bottom right circle button on your secondary controller, press it, hold it, and twist it all up. Hopefully this doesn't break the character or anything. That's good. Now we just take our primary controller, the bottom right circle button, click it to unselect everything, and then we can move these up. Whoops. Grab it with the trigger, move it over. Then, yeah, now we know everything's working good. Don't second guess yourself that, you built your nunchucks wrong. If you know that they were working just like this when you saved it, always remember that when you scale things down that have mechanisms in them, that have pistons or strings or elastics or bones, they sometimes get all funky and they break. Hopefully that doesn't happen to our guy here. Sometimes scaling something up or down before you place it will mitigate that. Sometimes it doesn't. But in any case, rewind time. Grab this with the primary controller trigger and twist it so that's kind of on the table. Drag it there. Make the grid finer with the minus sign here. Bottom left X button to select everything. Drag it down. And you make your grid finer. Make your grid finer. And you can really just do it manually. But I like the start time and then it falls. So we'll scope in until, and to scope in, secondary controller, top right triangle button, hold it, bottom left X button on the primary controller, click it, and then you can highlight that just that one handle. You can hit the top left square button on your primary controller to open that tweak menu. And now the Newton's Cradle, bottom left X on your primary controller, click that Newton's Cradle tab to get into this part again. And you want to just click that top button so it's movable. The little barrel rolling platform thingy. If it's, grayed out, that's why it won't fall down with the other one. So we'll scope out of here. Now that we didn't resize that, the nunchucks, they didn't break on us. So now this should move with... Nope. Making that movable is doing this. So, let's see if instead of making this movable, let's scope out once and make the nunchucks movable. There, that's what we needed. So don't make this primary handle movable. Make the entire nunchucks object, or not the entire nunchuck, but scope in once. Yeah, scope in once, and then make this group that it's a part of movable. Because, yeah, otherwise it becomes detached from that, and you don't want that. So you know that this is operating the way it should be. You play it, you pause it as soon as it hits the table, and now you just grab it once or twice, and when you rewind it, nah, see, sometimes that works. Like I would just scope out and then grab this and whoops, grab it all and move it over. But yeah, it does. It kind of remembers. So yeah, I do it manually. Whatever. Who cares? It's all like according to the grid. When you do it by the grid, you know that it'll be possible to line up. So now when we start, yeah, that barely even falls. But that's just me. I have a thing about that. But anyway. Now this is pretty much ready to go. If we view this, yeah, only problem is sizing up our VR puppet made the hands ginormous, and the camera viewing it, none of those settings have changed, so this is strange. So, couple ways to fix it. I mean, you could, you know, I'll just, I'll get the heck out of here. I won't save it. But I'll start from my Nunchucks file, remix that. I'll pop in my VR puppet. And if you just want the Nunchucks, like the point where you have it now, it's grabbable with an imp. If you don't want to use the VR puppet, you can still grab it with an imp, but I want to see if I can scale this down without breaking it. Because at the end of the day, scaling it down seemed like that wasn't what broke it. What broke it was I was trying to make, see, group. This needs to be movable instead of that handle. Great. Yeah, so now they're fine. So yeah, scaling it wasn't what broke it. But sometimes that is what breaks it. Just trust me. I know that's happened to me so many times before. Like, well, you just saw it happen with the VR puppet. We scaled that, and the camera settings and the head tracker and everything, it obviously was not right. So, whoops. Start again. I'll just put a little table here. Beep, beep. Using the techniques we learned from before. And just get into the hang of it, you know? Into the flow. Now, wait a minute. Always move it down and move it down so that it sticks out, by at least one, so you don't get that stuff going on. This corner that, it's because it's right there and it's doing the math, and it's like at this sculpture detail, that wedge has to be there, fam. So yeah, you move those bad boys down, and then you stretch it back up into the table. There we go. There's our table again. And now we should be fine. Just drag this thing up a little bit. So yeah, a little bit of troubleshooting there as well. So yeah, when you grab the dominant nunchuck, the other one comes with it. You grab this one, the other one doesn't come with it. So it's important to grab the chain or the dominant handle. There. So now, boom, there. That's perfect. Okay. Now we go into play mode, and we can grab this nunchuck. And it's really satisfying to swing around. And you have to grab that nunchuck. But yeah, it's kind of strange. Like the VR puppet, it always holds it on the outside. And if you're not orienting your hand right, like the nunchuck's gonna be oriented wrong. So we'll have to fix that later in another tutorial. But this allows you to grab the nunchucks. And they can hit things. You know? They're collidable. It's amazing how satisfying it is to swing a nunchuck in VR. I always wanted to do it, and so I'm glad I was able to do this tutorial to show you how to do it today. It's really fun. Now, I'm not sure if this nunchuck I'm holding is non-collidable, because I think, no, it's collidable because it's colliding with the table. But as you can see, it doesn't really interfere with the other nunchuck too much, which I think it's cool. I don't like it bouncing into the other one and, you know, creating a big disturbance. It just feels good to swing these, and they don't, like, bounce into each other. But they do hit objects in the scene. I just think it's very convenient that that's the way it works out of the box. With this VR puppet, you take your primary controller and you just point left or right from the middle of the scene here, and that determines which way you spin when you press in the move button of the primary controller. And then you can walk around with the trigger of the secondary controller, and when you pull it, the VR puppet points in the direction it's moving, pretty much. But, like, it's really like you do it like this. So yeah, as you can see, we can move around in this fashion. It takes a while to get used to. And then we can use the dominant hand of the VR puppet to grab the nunchuck. Either like right there, but yeah, or from afar, and you have to make sure that dot there that they set it up with is over the dominant nunchuck. It's like a pointer fleck. So one more thing I'll do in this scene is, what is it? Yeah, it is add damage to the nunchucks here. So I'll take the non-dominant nunchuck, scope in. Yeah, we don't have to scope in at all, actually. It'll let you. So I'm just going to look at everything from bird's eye view, take the secondary controller, pull the trigger for that, go to the gadgets menu here with the beam on the primary controller, bottom left X button to open that. I'm going to go into logic and processing, the yellow menu with all these like wires and plugs. Bottom left X button on the primary controller to bring up this menu. I'll put a, yeah, I don't think we need a microchip per se. Just yeah, so yeah, not logic and processing, but movers and output, I believe. Yeah, we'll go to health modifier here. It's like the heart with the gears. So again, gadgets menu, movers and output. It's got the box. It's pink with the arrow. Bottom left X button to open it with the beam. And then the heart with the gears inside. Bottom left X button to open it. And we'll stamp it. We'll just stamp it in midair since I have the grid on. I'll turn off the grid. Bottom left X button. Turn that off there. Right there. So, now, hold it with the trigger. Use my bottom, now one thing I could do, well, nah. I could put on precise move, but I'll put on my grid just to twist this upside down, because that'll help a little bit with the trigger zone. Put that down. Yeah, and I'll bottom left on the secondary controller, hold it to get the circle to twist, resize that. Wow. You grab it with the trigger on the primary controller. Resize it to about there, to where it fits on the nunchuck. Now we could turn off the grid, hold the trigger, and then, yeah, you just press triangle. So you grab it with the trigger, the primary controller, and then top right triangle button on the secondary controller, just hold it in, and then you let go of the trigger while it's like glued to this nunchuck, the secondary nunchuck that hits things. Now, on your, yeah, so it'll show you that it's like snapped into it by doing that. It becomes very thin, like a wafer. And then you take your secondary controller, the top right triangle, you hold it in. Then on your primary controller, top right square, to open this menu, click it while pointing the beam at that health modifier gadget. And then when it opens this, you'll pick the modifier type will be zone instead of impact. Zone seems more reliable and steady, but the reason we definitely want zone is because we make it occupy the size of the nunchuck. So as soon as we switch it to zone, and we did that here under modifier type, first page, modifier type, there's a heart with like a that's the impact, but we want zone. And then a sphere will appear. So we go to the second page here, zone properties, the shape, zone shape. Click it with the bottom left X on your primary, and then click the cylinder with the X. And then turn our grid back on. Secondary controller trigger to open it up. Guides, X, bottom left X on the primary controller. Turn your grid on with X. And then primary controller, pull the trigger to grab that little dot. Then press triangle to align it to grid, which is the top right button on your primary controller. And now it'll be angled this way, so you while holding the trigger still, you press your move button with this primary controller, tilt it your whole environment like this. Let go of the move middle button there, and then when you twist it back, this cylinder will rotate. And then you bring it back so that there's no green line right in there. And then once you let go of your move button, or whenever, take the bottom right circle on your secondary controller and hold it. Get that cylinder small, like the size of your nunchuck, like right there. And then you take your grid, make it finer, and you can line it up like that. In fact, now where the grid gets no finer, you still want to center it more. Take precise move. So turn off grid, take your beam, point it right there at this guy with all the axes. Bottom left X button on your primary controller, click it. Now, with your primary controller, pull the trigger and then just pull it to the left and then eyeball it. And you're good. Just look at it from different angles to make sure you've got the nunchuck inside there. Pull it in like that a little bit maybe. And now you can take the zone size. There's these sliders. You can figure out which one. Take your beam and do the bottom left X button on your primary controller and hold it when you click one of these sliders and watch the green zone and see what happens to it. Oh, we don't want it going out like that. Only like that, but maybe a little bit. Because we want that too. But we definitely want Z. But instead of pulling it up like that so that it goes left and right from this dot, you could bring the dot to the middle of the nunchuck and then do that. Or your other option is to just bring your primary controller to the bottom left and do the top left square on your primary controller button to undo, and then just take the well, you don't even have to. It'll let you, while you have this menu open, it'll let you stretch these sides. So go to the top face, grab it with the trigger, and just pull it to the edge of the nunchuck. So I think that's so much more convenient. Now, for this, since we want it only up a little bit by stuff that we can't really slide it to, and we want it for both X and Y, we're going to do it by taking our secondary controller, holding triangle on the top right button, hold it, primary controller, top left button, square, click it there, and then, yeah, we want like point 0.05 maybe? Yeah, and look at that. That's pretty good. So we'll take the Y, and then, again, secondary controller, top right triangle button, hold it, top left square on the primary controller, click it while pointing at this Y, and then put this to 0.52. And now we've got that. So that's like the damage space for the nunchuck. And minus 100 is probably a little bit dramatic. We'll put it to minus 10 there on the first page. And hopefully this works out the box and I don't look silly again, but you never know. Anything could happen. I'm gonna plop my enemy guy in here. Basic enemy. Try giving this a go. Come over here, enemy guy. I'm gonna get you. Oh yeah, look, it works. Oh my god, this is so cool. He ain't attacking me though, because I did not label this VR puppet as a friend. I'm just this poor guy. He's totally unsuspecting, and I'm just beating him to death with the nunchuck. I'm like totally invisible to his programming. But he's fast. And there you have it. You can put that damage up and make it... Oh, I dropped him. Ah, there they go. But that is unbelievably fun. So, yeah. And one final move. I'll go ahead and open up this guy's menu here. And label him... Oh, he is labeled friend. That's weird. Wonder why dude's not chasing him then. You know why, I bet. Because I need to put the look at me tag in there. Yeah, because I think it's gone now. Okay, here. Yeah, that tag was deleted from this puppet, I think. Or maybe it was never in there. I don't know how they made it. But tag. And I think it's like... I think it is capital L, look, and then space, lowercase a-t, space, m-e. All lowercase except that first L. Yeah, okay. That's the tag. Point it like this. I don't even know if that's correct. I think that's how it's supposed to be, but don't quote me. I'm just going to put it roughly in his head. With, you know, Z I imagine being depth, X for left and right, and Y for up and down, you know. There we go. So that's in the head. Look at me. Scope out, scope out. I think that's why. Huh. Nope. Z is not chasing me. But that's okay, because the thing I wanted to work works. The damage. That's awesome. I'll have to keep troubleshooting this, and I'll figure out how to get this guy to chase me in VR as well, because he chases the regular puppet. He chases the regular deluxe third-person deluxe puppet, or whatever it is called. To the table! I love how he points where he's walking. It's so cool. Alright, that's it, y'all. I will release this. All of these will be available. So, just search the Dreamiverse for VR nunchucks, and I'll tag all these with that. And have a good one, y'all. Hope you learned a lot. And see you next time.